As the night settles into its calm rhythm and the air grows soft, imagine yourself slowly stepping away from the noise of the world. The hum of distant streets fades, the light dims, and only the faint sound of your breath remains. You drift backward through time, through centuries of quiet transformation, until the world becomes a softer, slower place. Stone walls rise around you, cool to the touch, their surfaces marked by the passage of countless hands. Candles flicker along narrow halls, their light unsteady but warm, and the air holds the faint scent of wood smoke and rain. This is a world of shadows and stillness, where voices echo gently and every sound takes its time to fade. In this space, stories unfold not as noise but as memory, and the lives of queens and noble women become like whispers carried through the long corridors of history. Their names once stirred courts and armies, yet tonight they are only gentle figures moving through the haze of sleep. No crowns glitter, no battles rage, no proclamations rise from marble balconies. Instead, there is calm. The kind that lingers beneath the surface of power, the kind that exists when all has already been said and done. In this stillness, each story becomes a quiet dream, shaped not by ambition or judgment, but by endurance, by the way time softens every sharp edge until only peace remains. Now let us begin with Joanna of Naples, a queen born into the brightness of the 14th century, surrounded by the slow pulse of sea air and the quiet weight of destiny. Her life, once full of movement and intrigue, now drifts through memory like a calm tide against stone. She ruled not through thunder, but through still persistence, her presence more like the steady beat of a clock than the clamor of a court. Her days passed among tapestries and marble, the echo of footsteps on long staircases, and the endless sound of waves beyond her walls. 4 marriages marked her life, each like a season arriving and departing with quiet inevitability. Her heart, though often spoken of by others, was something she kept carefully folded within herself, untouched by rumor, undisturbed by time. When the court grew restless, she remained composed, her eyes following the slow dance of sunlight through the window. In the evenings, she walked through the palace gardens, where the scent of orange blossoms drifted through the air and the city below glimmered faintly under the moon. There was no hurry in her step, no sign of worry on her face, only the slow rhythm of someone who had learned to live within the stillness of her own thoughts. As the years passed, her power changed shape, turning from command into presence, from control into calm acceptance. She learned that not every silence is empty and that not every shadow hides fear. Sometimes silence simply is a companion, a listener, a soft veil between the heart and the world. And so Joanna lived quietly, each day unfolding with the same steady grace. Her kingdom breathed around her, the streets below alive with life, the sea forever moving, the bells of Naples ringing through the dusk. In the quiet hours of night, when candles burned low and the halls were empty, Joanna often stood at her window. The moonlight painted her face in silver tones, her eyes calm, her hands resting lightly on the stone ledge. The sound of the wind moved through the curtains, and she would listen, not for words, but for the rhythm of the world continuing without her command. It was in these moments that she seemed most alive, not as a ruler, but as a presence, steady and unbroken. When her story came to its close, it did not end with sorrow or applause. It ended as softly as a breath. The city continued as before, the waves kept their rhythm, and her name drifted into the silence of time. What remains of her now is not the record of deeds or crowns, but the feeling of stillness she left behind. A calm that endures like the sea she once watched, quiet and infinite. And as you breathe slowly, feeling the weight of the night settle into peace, her memory becomes a part of that same still rhythm, the slow, endless heartbeat of history, steady and serene beneath the surface of sleep. Eleanor of Aquitaine. Eleanor of Aquitaine lived in a world that moved like sunlight over stone, slow, steady, and full of quiet meaning. She was born in a time when music filled the halls of castles, when stories were carried not by books, but by the rhythm of voices, and when power was measured not only by armies, but by the ability to wait, to listen, and to hold one's silence. Her childhood was surrounded by the warmth of the southern air, the scent of vineyards, and the distant hum of lutes drifting through open windows. As she grew, her mind became sharp and luminous, her thoughts flowing like rivers beneath calm surfaces. She would one day become both Queen of France and Queen of England, yet in her memory, what remains is not the noise of thrones, but the quiet grace with which she carried her years. She walked through life as one walks through a garden in early morning, where the dew has not yet dried, and every leaf holds a fragile shimmer of light. Her footsteps were calm, her words deliberate, and when she spoke, her tone carried neither command nor plea, only the balance of understanding. There were many who wrote about her strength, but few who noticed her stillness, the way she could move through a room and leave behind a sense of calm, as if the air itself had taken a deeper breath. Her years as Queen of France were filled with travel and ceremony, yet she always found a quiet space within herself, a space untouched by courtly noise. She watched as banners unfurled and processions filled the streets, but her gaze was often turned inward, toward thought, toward memory. She understood that power, like water, changes its form when held too tightly. And so, she held hers lightly, letting it flow where it must, guiding it with patience rather than force. When her marriage to the French king came to its natural end, she did not resist the change. She accepted it with the same composure she brought to every part of her life. The road ahead was long, and she would walk it with the calm certainty of one who knows that all moments, even the difficult ones, are simply part of the same unfolding. Later, as Queen of England, she lived among stone towers and distant horizons. The air there was colder, the light more muted, but her spirit remained warm. She raised her sons with the same quiet attention she had given to every detail of her world, teaching them not through instruction, but through example. She moved through court and countryside with ease, her presence gentle yet firm, her words chosen with care. Even in times of tension, she did not allow anger to break the rhythm of her voice. Her calmness was her shield, her silence her most graceful weapon. As the years deepened, Eleanor's world began to slow. She found peace not in the noise of rule, but in the texture of small things, the sound of a page turning, the flicker of a candle, the soft rustle of a gown against the floor. She surrounded herself with music and words, and she became a patron of poets and thinkers who saw in her a reflection of balance and wisdom. The courts of love that grew around her name were filled with songs of devotion and reflection, but behind them all was her quiet influence, her belief that even in power, beauty must be tempered with restraint. There were moments of sorrow too, moments that tested the edges of her endurance, but she faced them as she faced everything, without spectacle, without despair, only with the soft acceptance that all things pass. She spent many years away from the world's noise, her time measured not by politics, but by the slow pattern of the seasons. The wind moved through the old towers, the bells rang across the hills, and she would sit by a narrow window, her gaze lost in the distance, watching the light shift across the landscape she had once ruled. Those who came to see her in her later years described a woman whose presence felt timeless, as if she belonged not to one century, but to the rhythm of all of them. Her voice was lower now, quieter, yet still steady, still certain. She no longer spoke of conquest or legacy, but of peace, of the quiet satisfaction that comes when one has seen much and asks for nothing more. Around her, the world continued to change, yet she remained as she had always been, a calm center within the endless motion of time. In the evenings, she would walk slowly through the gardens that surrounded her quiet home. The paths were lined with lavender and worn stone, and the air was filled with the scent of earth after rain. The sun would dip below the horizon and the sky would turn to gold, then violet, then soft grey. The first stars appeared, faint and patient, and the world around her exhaled. She would pause there, feeling the air move against her skin, hearing the faint rustle of leaves, the gentle beating of her heart. There was no crown upon her head now, no court awaiting her return, only the presence of time, unhurried and kind. When she closed her eyes, she could still see the places she had once known, the rivers of Aquitaine, the hills of Anjou, the great halls of London, the fields of Poitiers. They came to her, not as memories of power, but as soft images carried by light. She did not regret what had passed, she only breathed in and let it all rest. In the long story of history, Eleanor of Aquitaine remains not as an image of might, but as one of grace. Her life teaches nothing dramatic, nothing loud. It is a quiet reminder that even in the highest halls, peace can live quietly, waiting for those who know how to hear it. And as the night deepens and the story drifts towards silence, her name becomes a slow echo, fading gently like the sound of footsteps down a candlelit corridor, leaving only stillness and the soft rhythm of time breathing through the walls of the world. Isabella and Margaret. As the long story of Eleanor fades gently into silence, the air around the mind seems to shift again, carrying you forward through time into another century, another quiet corner of the world where the light of torches glows softly against the cool walls of stone. Here, two figures move like shadows on the edge of memory, Isabella of France and Margaret of Burgundy. Their names, once whispered with both admiration and fear, now lie within the calm waters of the past. The stories that surrounded them, once filled with accusation and fire, have since dissolved into the soft mist of time, leaving behind only the faint trace of two women who endured the still weight of expectation. Isabella was born into the courts of France, where every gesture was watched, every silence interpreted, and every word carried on the polished air of ceremony. She learned early that quiet could be a language, that stillness could speak more than sound. As a child, she moved through marble corridors where light poured through tall windows, and her reflection followed her across the shining floors. She grew accustomed to the rhythm of formality, to the slow, deliberate pace of royal days. By the time she was sent to England to marry King Edward, she already understood how to carry calm like armor, how to keep her thoughts hidden beneath the gentle stillness of her gaze. England was a colder world, a land of grey skies and restless winds. The stone castles felt heavier there, the air thicker, the sea darker. Isabella found herself surrounded by voices she could not trust, by courtiers whose laughter carried meanings hidden beneath its surface. Yet she did not react. She learned to move quietly through this foreign world, to listen, to wait. Her husband, the king, was a man of distance, a figure whose heart seemed turned toward others more than toward her. And though their marriage would later become a story told in endless versions, what mattered to Isabella was the silence between the words, the space where she could breathe and still remain unseen. She walked the corridors of her English home in long robes of velvet and wool, the sound of her footsteps muffled by woven carpets, her face illuminated only by the flicker of candlelight. Servants bowed as she passed, yet she felt herself slowly fading from their gaze, becoming something quieter than a queen, an observer, a presence. The nights grew long, the halls colder, and in that stillness she began to understand something about endurance, about the kind of strength that does not rise or fight, but simply remains. Far away in Burgundy, Margaret lived a life that echoed Isabella's in quiet reflection. She too was born into the order of noble expectation, her days shaped by tutors and attendants, her evenings by ritual and restraint. She had laughter once, bright and easy, but it was soon folded beneath the calm mask of duty. When she married into the royal family of France, her world became even more delicate, a place where affection was watched and discretion was demanded. She learned to move through that world with the grace of someone walking through glass. Every gesture was precise, every glance weighed. Her name would later become tangled in one of the most whispered tales of medieval scandal, a story told and retold across centuries, the Tour de Nesle affair. Yet here, in the quiet version of time, there is no scandal, no outrage, no fire. There is only Margaret, a woman caught between the desire to live freely and the heavy stillness of the crown. She was young, her heart unguarded, her world defined by men who measured worth by silence and control. What followed was not noise but stillness. The kind of stillness that comes after truth is taken from one's hands, the kind that stretches across stone walls and empty chambers. In the quiet retelling, Margaret does not cry out. She does not defend or deny. She simply sits in the dim light of her cell, the air cold, the walls damp, her breath slow and visible in the winter air. The sound of water drips somewhere unseen. The world outside continues without her, the bells ringing distantly over the river, the market still alive with sound. But here, time stands still. The world grows smaller and her thoughts move inward, becoming softer, more distant, like fading light. There is no longer fear, only acceptance, a sense of release into stillness. Isabella's own story, too, would carry her through silence and through waiting. When her time as queen changed shape, when the years brought her to moments of decision, she moved through them not as a figure of anger, but as one of inevitability. Even the choices that history would later call betrayal were, to her, simply the slow unfolding of what must come. There was no rush, no sudden break, only the steady rhythm of events falling into place. Her life was not a story of rebellion or vengeance, but of transformation, from the stillness of endurance to the stillness of resolve. When she grew older, her days became quieter still. The gardens of her home were filled with long shadows, and she would walk among them as the light faded, her hands clasped loosely before her. She no longer sought to shape the world. She only wished to understand it. She spent her evenings near the fire, her gaze turned toward the window, where the sky darkened into night. Sometimes she would hear the wind move through the branches, or the faint rustle of the sea beyond, and she would feel the calm of distance settle over her completely. Margaret's story, too, ended in stillness. History remembers her confinement, her isolation, but here, in the quiet version of things, there is peace. The walls that once seemed to close around her now become her shelter. The world no longer demands anything from her. The noise of accusation and fear has faded. She breathes. She waits. And then, like all lives, her story fades into silence. Between Isabella and Margaret, between their distant lives and mirrored fates, there exists a thread of quiet endurance. Both lived in worlds shaped by others, yet both carried within them a calm that history could not erase. Theirs are not stories of conquest, but of patience, not of rebellion, but of still presence. When the world around them became heavy, they did not shout. They simply remained, their silence becoming their legacy. Now, as time continues its slow movement forward, the memory of these women drifts like mist over the rivers of France and England, soft and unbroken. Their faces have vanished, their voices are gone, yet something of their stillness remains in the air, in the rhythm of waves against old bridges, in the faint hum of evening bells. And as you listen now, lying beneath the calm breath of night, their presence joins the long chorus of those who came before, Eleanor, Joanna, and now Isabella and Margaret, each one a quiet note in the endless song of time, blending together until they become only peace, only silence, only the steady, gentle pulse of history moving through sleep. The Queens of Change. The long corridors of time continue their slow turning, carrying us gently beyond the centuries of Isabella and Margaret, beyond the silent towers of France and England, into a softer light where new voices begin to emerge. The world has changed, though its rhythm remains slow and familiar. In this new age, two women rise quietly from the haze of memory, Joanna of Castile and Catherine of Russia. Their lives unfold not in fire or rebellion, but in the slow transformation of thought and spirit, where the strength of stillness becomes its own kind of rule. Joanna of Castile was born beneath the brightness of the Spanish sun, into a court filled with ceremony and devotion. From the moment she could walk, she was surrounded by ritual and expectation, her every step observed, her every silence noted. She learned early that her life would not be her own, that her path would be guided by duty and alliance, by the careful weaving of kingdoms through marriage and name. Yet within her calm eyes there was always a depth of feeling, a quiet weight of understanding that moved beneath the surface of obedience. When she was young, her days were marked by music and study, by the faint hum of voices teaching her the languages of faith, of diplomacy, and of silence. She grew to love the patterns of the world around her, the way light fell across stone at morning, the scent of parchment warmed by sunlight, the slow ticking of time in the echoing halls of Castile. And though history would one day call her by a name filled with sorrow, it is not madness that defines her here. It is tenderness and endurance and the unbroken rhythm of love that continued long after the world had forgotten to listen. Her husband, Philip, known for his beauty and charm, moved through life with the brightness of flame, and Joanna followed him as one follows the sun across the sky, steady, devoted, but always at a distance. When loss came, as it always does, she did not rage against it. She carried her grief as one carries a candle through darkness, careful not to let it go out, careful not to let the flame consume her. Her love became memory, and her memory became silence. The world around her would speak of sorrow, of madness, of shadows in her mind, but what truly filled her heart was something quieter. A longing for peace, for stillness, for the soft return of a time when she could simply be. In the long years that followed, Joanna lived within the rhythm of the seasons, the passing of light through narrow windows, the soft sound of wind through gardens she rarely entered. The courtyards changed, the rulers changed, the voices around her changed, yet she remained, a constant stillness at the center of history's movement. Time folded gently around her until the world outside became only a murmur, a distant hum that no longer reached her. When she closed her eyes, she could still hear the sound of footsteps on marble, the echo of laughter from another life. Her story, in the quiet truth of things, is not one of despair, but of devotion, a devotion so deep it became its own kind of peace. Far away in another land, centuries later, Catherine of Russia was born under the northern sky, where the winters were long and the light fell like silver dust across frozen rivers. She came into a world of grandeur and control, a court filled with brilliance and restraint, where every gesture carried weight and every silence could shape an empire. From the beginning, she understood the stillness of power, the patience it required, the careful rhythm of waiting until the right moment arrived. Her youth was spent in study and observation. She read in the quiet hours of dawn, her candle flickering low, her breath forming faint clouds in the cold air. She listened more than she spoke, learning from the cadence of voices around her, from the way words could move armies or mend divisions. When her time came to rule, she did so not with sudden fire, but with the steady light of intention. The people called her great, but Catherine herself thought in simpler terms. She saw herself as a keeper of balance, a guardian of order, a presence that must remain calm even as the world shifted and turned beneath her feet. The nights in the Russian palaces were vast and silent, the halls echoing with the faint steps of attendants, the soft creak of wooden doors, the distant sound of snow falling outside. Catherine often walked alone during these hours, the light of her lantern gliding across portraits and gilded frames. Her thoughts were deliberate, her heart steady. She believed that true strength was not the act of command, but the ability to remain composed when all else became uncertain. Her reforms, her decisions, all flowed from that still core within her, a sense that every change must begin from calm understanding. There were moments of solitude, long evenings where the vastness of her palace mirrored the vastness of her thoughts. The fire would burn low, casting slow-moving shadows along the walls, and Catherine would sit by her desk, her quill moving quietly across paper. Each word was a thought extended into the world, each line a reflection of patience and purpose. She knew that power was fragile, that empires could rise and fall like the tide, but she trusted in the slow rhythm of work, in the steady accumulation of order. To her, every reform was like a stone laid carefully into place, each one supporting the next, building something that might endure long after her name had faded into the pages of history. Outside, the snow would fall endlessly, covering the gardens, the statues, the long roads that led to the city. The sound was soft, like breathing. The world, for a moment, seemed perfectly still. Inside the palace, the light flickered, and Catherine would look up from her writing to watch the glow of the fire shift and dance. In that quiet moment, she was not an empress, not a ruler, not a figure of history. She was simply a woman awake in the heart of winter, listening to the world rest. In the quiet union of these two lives, Joanna of Castile and Catherine of Russia, we find not the clash of kingdoms, but the slow evolution of the human heart. Both women lived within the stillness of their own strength. Both learned that silence can hold more truth than words, that patience can shape the world more deeply than force. Their stories are like twin reflections across time, the same calm light mirrored on different waters, one warm and golden beneath the Spanish sun, the other pale and shimmering beneath the northern sky. Now, as the night deepens and their memories drift into the quiet air, their presence becomes softer still, blending into the rhythm of history that moves beneath all things. The seas that once touched Spain whisper to the frozen rivers of Russia, and between them flows a single thought, a quiet, steady current of grace. In the long stillness of time, both Joanna and Catherine remain, not as rulers or legends, but as moments of peace, unbroken and eternal, resting gently in the vast and silent landscape of sleep. Shadows and survival. The world turns once more, and the light of memory shifts to a dimmer hue. The centuries move forward, the castles grow colder, the wind stronger, and the stories that remain are those told not through grandeur, but through endurance. In the soft rhythm of time, two figures emerge from shadow, Fredegund of Neustria and Anne Boleyn. Their lives, though separated by 1,000 years, are bound by the same quiet truth, that survival, even in silence, carries its own kind of strength. Fredegund lived in the early dawn of kingdoms, when Europe was still young, when power passed not through words, but through presence, through the steady breath of those who refused to vanish. She was born into obscurity, yet moved into the heart of empire, rising from servant to queen through patience and the quiet understanding of the world's hidden movements. Around her, the halls of Neustria were filled with echoes, the murmurs of courtiers, the rustle of fabric, the soft click of jeweled cups against stone tables. Outside, the forests were vast and the rivers slow, and every breath of air carried the weight of waiting. Fredegund learned early that power was not a single act, but a long, slow current, something that moved unseen beneath the surface of speech and gesture. She watched, she listened, and when she acted, she did so without haste. Her world was one of danger and intrigue, yet she moved through it as through a dream, her steps soft, her expression unreadable. Where others shouted or threatened, she simply remained, her silence shaping the space around her. In the years that followed, her name would be carried through time as one marked by shadow, by whispers of deeds too heavy to name. But in this retelling, all that remains is stillness. The image of a woman standing by a window at dusk, the sky fading beyond the horizon, her thoughts slow and unbroken. The court around her was restless, filled with the movement of men who sought control, but Fredegund found her calm in the quiet hours when the noise of power faded into the low hum of the night. She would walk alone through the corridors, her hand brushing against the cool stone, the sound of her footsteps steady, measured, without fear. The world outside could change, but her own rhythm did not. She learned that to endure was to wait, and to wait was to win. In the centuries that followed, another woman would live in another kingdom, another court filled with light and whispers. Anne Boleyn, born into the glow of Tudor England, where the air carried the scent of ink and candle wax, where the sound of lute strings and soft voices filled the halls of Hampton Court. Her life, like Fredegund's, was shaped by observation. She too understood the rhythm of power, the quiet way it entered a room, the way it rested behind words. Anne was not born into greatness, she grew into it, slowly, quietly, through patience and grace. Her beauty was not in the way she looked, but in the way she moved, the way her thoughts seemed to travel just ahead of her words. In a world where every glance was recorded and every silence read, she became fluent in the language of restraint. The king's attention fell upon her like sunlight, bright and consuming, and the world around her changed. Yet, even then, beneath the pageantry, beneath the gold and the noise, Anne carried with her a sense of stillness, a calm that no flattery could disturb. As her life intertwined with the crown, time began to move differently. The days grew longer, filled with expectation, the nights quieter, filled with the slow drift of thought. The palace corridors were lit by countless candles, their flames trembling in the breath of passing air. Servants moved like shadows, carrying messages, arranging the endless rituals of court, while Anne remained poised, her eyes steady, her composure unbroken. She had learned what Fredegund once knew, that silence can be stronger than speech, that stillness can command more than sound. When change came, as it always does, it came not with thunder, but with the soft, inevitable movement of time. The same silence that once protected Anne began to surround her like a veil. The corridors grew colder, the glances sharper, and the air heavier. Yet even in those final days, she carried herself as she always had, graceful, calm, unyielding. There were no cries, no pleas, no breaks in the rhythm of her voice. Her story, which history remembers as tragedy, here becomes simply transition. A soul stepping from one quiet room to another, the world beyond her continuing its steady hum. Both Fredegund and Anne lived within shadows, yet they shaped those shadows into shelter. They understood that endurance was not only survival, but art, the art of moving slowly, of breathing evenly, of remaining whole, even as the world shifted around them. They carried their calm like a secret, hidden behind their eyes, unspoken but undeniable. In the quiet hours of reflection, their stories seem almost to blend. The ancient queen standing in her darkened chamber, the Renaissance woman walking through a sunlit gallery, both looking toward windows filled with light, both framed by stillness. The centuries between them disappear, leaving only the same gentle pulse of awareness, the same understanding of what it means to exist quietly beneath the noise of history. Now, as the wind of time moves on, their presence remains in the subtle details of memory. The scent of lavender in an empty room, the soft click of shoes against stone, the glint of candlelight on glass. These are the traces they left behind, small, delicate, enduring. They remind us that not all power needs to be loud, that not all strength must rise to be seen. Sometimes it is enough simply to endure, to remain, to breathe. The night deepens and the light grows dimmer. The world around you becomes slower, softer. Fredegund and Anne drift now into silence, their lives like threads woven into the fabric of sleep. The air grows still and the sound of the past fades to a low murmur, steady as a heartbeat. Somewhere far away, the sea moves against the shore, the same sea that has watched all queens and all centuries pass. And in that endless rhythm, they both rest, two quiet figures in the vastness of time, surrounded by calm, remembered not for their noise, but for their silence, and for the grace of simply surviving. Women of wit and quiet defiance. As the echoes of Fredegund and Anne drift softly into stillness, the current of history carries us onward once more into another time, another landscape of quiet light and slow understanding. The centuries change their colors, the air grows softer, the halls of power take on a gentler tone. In this calm unfolding, two figures come into view, Christina of Denmark and Maria of Portugal. Their stories are not written in battle or in the clash of kingdoms, but in wit, restraint, and quiet defiance. They lived not through the roar of command, but through the art of remaining calm when the world demanded reaction. Christina of Denmark was born into a court of order and beauty, where every movement was practiced and every silence meant something. The halls were wide and filled with the echo of measured steps, the sound of fabric brushing marble, the distant murmur of courtiers speaking softly beneath vaulted ceilings. She grew among the patterns of etiquette, learning the rhythm of diplomacy like music, where pause and timing could mean more than words. From an early age, she was known for her composure, her gentle humor, and the unshakable calm that seemed to follow her wherever she went. She was still young when she was offered as a possible bride to powerful men across Europe, her name traveling through letters sealed with wax and carried by riders across distant lands. Among those names was one she refused with quiet wit, the King of England, whose reputation preceded him like thunder before rain. Her answer, spoken with grace and soft laughter, carried through the courts of Europe. "If I had two heads, I would put one at the disposal of the King of England." It was not defiance born of rebellion, but of clarity, of knowing her own worth, her own limits. The world remembered her words because they were not cruel, only honest, wrapped in humor so gentle it could not wound. In the long years that followed, Christina lived with the ease of someone who had made peace with her own path. She moved through her world like a quiet stream, steady and deliberate. Those who met her spoke of her calm voice, her patient eyes, the way she could end an argument without raising her tone. When life brought her loss, she met it as she met everything, with silence, with the quiet grace of someone who understood that sorrow too has its rhythm and that no feeling remains forever. Her strength was not the kind that changed the course of nations, but the kind that keeps the soul steady amid change, the still center in a turning world. Far away, another woman lived a life shaped by similar currents. Maria of Portugal, a queen whose days unfolded within the solemn rhythm of duty and devotion. She was born into a world of gilded tapestries and dim corridors where loyalty was both gift and burden. From her earliest days, she moved through her palace like a figure in a painting, her gestures careful, her words few. She understood the quiet discipline of her station, the art of appearing composed even when the heart was weary. Her marriage brought her into a life surrounded by splendor, but shadowed by solitude. Her husband, a man of divided affections, filled his court with noise and presence, leaving Maria to the silent wings of the palace. Yet within that silence, she found her own kind of rhythm. The gardens became her refuge, the long colonnades her paths of thought. She would walk there in the late afternoons, her hands folded before her, her steps unhurried, her gaze turned toward the horizon. The air carried the scent of jasmine and sun-warmed stone, and the slow murmur of fountains blended with the sound of her breathing. Maria learned, as many queens did, that stillness could be a kind of strength. Her patience was not resignation, it was endurance. She listened to the world around her and let its noise pass through her like wind through leaves. When her son grew, she poured into him the same quiet steadiness she had carried all her life, teaching not through command, but through presence. Her days passed in cycles of light and shadow, her world shrinking gradually to the rooms she loved most, the places where silence felt like companionship rather than isolation. In the twilight of her years, Maria spent her time by the window, the lace curtain moving faintly in the breeze. The gardens below still bloomed, though the colors had softened. The bells of the nearby chapel marked the hours with gentle regularity, and she would sit, listening, her face calm, her eyes following the slow movement of the sky. She no longer thought of the past as something lost, but as something absorbed into her like light into glass. Every memory, every pain, every joy, all became part of the same still surface. Between Christina and Maria, between Denmark's cool grace and Portugal's quiet sun, a single thread connects their lives, a thread woven of composure, understanding, and the quiet rebellion of peace. Both women faced worlds that expected them to bend, to yield, to become what others wished them to be. Yet neither broke. They did not shout their defiance, they lived it softly. In the patience of each breath, in the steadiness of each moment, they refused to be undone. Christina's wit was her shield, Maria's calm her anchor. Both discovered that there is freedom in quietness, that peace can be its own form of power. And though their names rest now in the soft pages of history, their essence lingers. The gentle laughter of Christina echoing faintly through marble halls, the soft tread of Maria's footsteps along sunlit corridors, the air around them filled with serenity that neither time nor distance can erase. The centuries drift forward, and the memory of these women moves like a faint perfume in the evening air, delicate and lasting. They remind us that not every act of defiance is loud, that not every strength must shine. Sometimes it is the quiet voice that remains when all else has faded, the calm presence that outlives the storm. And as night deepens once more, their stories sink into the hush of time. The world around you slows, the light grows dimmer, and the rhythm of your breath finds its place within the same eternal pattern. Christina and Maria dissolve into that stillness, their grace now part of the soft pulse of history, steady and endless, like the gentle sound of wind moving through the leaves at the edge of sleep. The distant realms. The air changes again, and the soft rhythm of history carries us far beyond the stone corridors of Europe. The wind now moves across distant lands, over mountains and great rivers, where palaces rise from mist and the sky opens wide above ancient kingdoms. Here, far from the familiar light of the West, two women once ruled with quiet strength, Wu Zetian of China and Queen Tamar of Georgia. Their worlds were vast, their power immense, yet both understood that the deepest authority comes not from command, but from stillness, from the calm at the center of motion. Wu Zetian was born in an empire of order and silence, a place where the sound of silk moving through corridors was softer than breath, and where every word carried the weight of the dynasty itself. As a young woman, she entered the imperial court as one among many, her future uncertain, her presence barely marked in the endless flow of ceremonial life. Yet from the beginning, she possessed a calm that set her apart, a steady watchfulness, a patience that never broke. She understood that power was not always taken in noise, but gathered in silence, piece by piece, until it became unshakable. The world around her moved in rituals older than memory. The mornings began with the sound of gongs and the scent of incense curling through the air, the courtiers standing in rows as sunlight filtered through carved screens. Wu moved through this order as though she belonged to the air itself, unhurried, graceful, invisible, until she chose to be seen. The emperor noticed her calm, the clarity of her mind, and in time she rose, not through defiance, but through inevitability, each step taken with the patience of the earth itself, turning beneath the sun. Her reign would one day be remembered as one of transformation, though her power was not loud. She ruled as one who understood the rhythm of nature, the slow growth of roots, the gentle persistence of water-shaping stone. The empire she guided expanded and prospered, yet her legacy, when seen through the quiet lens of time, is one of thoughtfulness, of balance. She read deeply, surrounded by scrolls and quiet attendants, her nights long and filled with the steady scratch of brushes on paper. Her court was alive with scholars, poets, and artists, all drawn to the serenity that seemed to flow from her presence. There were moments of challenge, of uncertainty, of human frailty, but she met them as she met all things, with calm precision, with reflection before movement. To those who sought to understand her, she seemed distant, perhaps even cold. But in truth, she was simply still, her mind moving beneath the surface like deep water. When she spoke, her voice carried not command but clarity, and her decisions flowed like the seasons, inevitable, necessary, natural. Far to the west, across deserts and seas, another realm rose beneath the high mountains and the slow drift of clouds. Georgia, a land of valleys and fortresses, where rivers gleamed beneath the light of dawn. There, centuries after Wu Zetian, Queen Tamar lived and ruled, her presence steady as the hills that framed her kingdom. She was born into a time of tension and promise, when her people looked for balance between faith and freedom, between strength and peace. Yet even as the world pressed its weight upon her, Tamar remained composed, her heart moving at a slower rhythm than the noise around her. Her days were spent within the stone halls of Tbilisi, where torches flickered and the sound of the city drifted through open arches. Advisors came and went, their voices filled with plans and reports, but Tamar's calm never faltered. She listened, she weighed, and she answered only when the moment required. Her strength lay not in commanding the loudest voice, but in hearing the smallest truth. Those who served her learned to recognize that silence, when it came from her, was never emptiness, it was consideration. Beyond her court, the land itself seemed to move with her pulse. The hills rolled gently toward distant snow, and the rivers shimmered beneath the midday sun. She ruled through peace when possible, and with resolve when needed, but always through understanding. Under her reign, Georgia flourished in art, in poetry, in thought. The songs written in her time spoke not of conquest, but of light and harmony, of a world guided by gentleness rather than fear. In the quiet moments of evening, Tamar would walk through the courtyards of her palace, her robes brushing softly against the stone. The air smelled of pine and distant rain, and from the terraces she could see the horizon stretching endlessly, the line between earth and sky fading in the dusk. The torches burned low, the city lights glowed faintly below, and the wind carried the faint murmur of prayers and laughter. She would stand there, her eyes on the far distance, feeling not the burden of rule, but the still beauty of time itself. Though their worlds were separated by thousands of miles and years, Wu Zetian and Queen Tamar shared the same quiet strength. Both lived in times that asked much of them, yet neither bent under the weight. Both understood that patience is a form of courage, that stillness can guide more surely than noise. Their reigns were long, their legacies lasting, but what remains most of all is the calm that surrounded them, the composure that turned power into grace. Wu's empire, vast and intricate, still echoes with her presence in the gardens where the wind moves through bamboo, in the poems that speak of balance and light. Tamar's Georgia, with its mountains and old churches, still carries her name like a whisper in the wind. The world remembers them not only as rulers, but as still points in the turning of history, places where time itself seemed to pause, breathe, and remember its own rhythm. Now, as the night grows deeper, their memory joins the others, the queens of patience, of wisdom, of endurance. The sound of distant bells fades into the air, the light softens, and the great realms of east and west fold into one another, becoming a single dream of stillness. The rivers of China meet the mountains of Georgia in the endless space of thought, and between them flows the quiet understanding that all power, all glory, all time must one day rest. As you listen, as you breathe, the calm they carried becomes your own. The world outside fades and only the rhythm remains, the slow, endless rhythm of time moving gently forward through the realms of earth and memory into silence. The Veiled Voices. The night grows softer as time moves forward once again, and the echo of distant centuries fades like mist over fields of marble. The air now belongs to a quieter age, an age of elegance and illusion, where candlelight shimmered on glass and whispers drifted through gilded halls. In this softened world, two figures move like reflections in water: Marie Antoinette of France and Empress Elizabeth of Austria. Their lives, though framed by beauty and luxury, carried a stillness that few could see, a longing for silence within the endless performance of power. Marie Antoinette entered the world of Versailles when the air itself seemed made of perfume and ceremony. The palace stretched like a dream of light and symmetry, its mirrors reflecting the faces of those who lived only for appearance. She was young, graceful, and full of quiet curiosity, her voice soft against the murmurs of courtiers who surrounded her every hour. From the moment she arrived, her life became a pattern of motion and ritual, the slow rhythm of bows, the turning of heads, the endless walk from one room to another. Yet beneath the layers of silk and etiquette there lived a heart that longed for calm, for simplicity, for something that would not vanish when the music stopped. Each morning began with the careful unfolding of her day. The opening of curtains to pale light, the quiet steps of attendants, the rustle of gowns. The gardens of Versailles lay beyond her windows, their fountains murmuring with patient rhythm, the trees trimmed into perfect order. She would gaze at them often, her thoughts distant, her breath slow. The voices around her spoke of alliances, of expectations, of the endless maintenance of grace. But she listened only to the faint sound of wind through the leaves, the way the morning sun touched the surface of the water. As the years passed, the world outside the palace began to shift. The laughter of the court grew sharper, the air more uncertain. Yet within herself, Marie Antoinette carried a strange serenity, as if she could not fully believe in the noise beyond the walls. In her private rooms, she surrounded herself with softness, books, fabrics, music played in minor tones. She found refuge in simplicity, tending to flowers, playing with her children, walking quietly through the gardens where no one else was allowed. These were her true hours, the only moments that belonged entirely to her. History would remember her for many things, some harsh, some imagined. But in the quiet retelling, she is simply a woman watching the world around her transform, unable to stop it, yet unwilling to despair. Her stillness became her final grace, the calm before the inevitable change, the steady breath before the silence. When the end came, it came not with noise but with acceptance, the last act of composure in a life spent under unrelenting gaze. Far from France, in another age of gilded palaces and quiet corridors, Empress Elizabeth of Austria, known to her people as Sisi, moved through her own labyrinth of beauty and solitude. Her story began like a poem, filled with light and promise. She was young, spirited, and full of life, her laughter echoing through the gardens of Bavaria before she was chosen to marry the emperor. She entered Vienna as a symbol of joy, yet found there the slow confinement of formality, the endless repetition of gestures that dulled the brightness of her heart. Sisi was unlike the world around her. Where others thrived on order, she sought the open air. She loved the quiet of morning rides, the rhythm of hooves against the ground, the vastness of the sky above the Danube. The palace, with its mirrors and its watchful eyes, became to her a place of stillness too heavy to bear. and so she learned to move lightly through it, to disappear, to let her silence speak for her. She wrote poetry in secret, words that carried the gentle melancholy of wind moving through leaves. Her verses spoke of longing, of freedom, of the wish to dissolve into air. Yet she never spoke of this aloud. To the world she was elegance, composure, perfection. To herself she was a traveler between two worlds, the world of duty and the world of thought. She understood, as few did, that peace could exist only in movement, in the slow rhythm of escape. When she traveled, she found moments of calm, the sound of the sea against the shores of Corfu, the quiet scent of olive trees in the heat, the light falling across marble statues in her island home. She built places not to rule from, but to rest within. Her life became a search for stillness, though she was never truly still. Even in her later years, when the weight of the crown had become distant, she carried herself with grace, so quiet it seemed almost transparent. Marie Antoinette and Elizabeth, two women separated by time but joined by silence, by the invisible thread that binds those who live within beauty, yet yearn for peace. Both were surrounded by brilliance, yet drawn toward shadow, toward the calm that exists only when the world's eyes finally look away. Their strength was not the power to change history, but the courage to remain themselves within it. In the soft space of memory, their images linger, the sound of Marie's laughter echoing faintly through the gardens of Versailles, the light touch of Cece's hand on the mane of her horse as she rides into the dawn. The world remembers them as symbols, but here they are only voices of stillness, reminders that beneath every crown lies a simple heart that beats at the same slow rhythm as our own. The night deepens once more, the air thick with the scent of roses and fading light. The great palaces stand silent now, their halls empty, their mirrors reflecting only the moon. Somewhere the faint sound of music drifts from a forgotten room, and in that music their presence remains, soft, distant, eternal. Marie Antoinette and Empress Elizabeth fade gently into the calm of time, leaving behind not tragedy, not sorrow, but the delicate peace of acceptance, the quiet truth that beauty and stillness, once found, never truly disappear. The twilight reign. The centuries draw closer now to our own, and the light of history grows softer, touched by the quiet shimmer of the modern age. The sound of carriages has faded into the hum of machines, the whisper of candles replaced by the faint glow of gaslight. Yet even in this shifting world, the rhythm of queens remains unchanged, the slow, deliberate movement of duty, the steady breath of endurance. Among them, two figures rise gently from the mist of time, Queen Victoria of Britain and Empress Alexandra of Russia. Their worlds, though grand and far apart, shared the same stillness at the edge of change, the same twilight calm that marks the end of one age and the beginning of another. Victoria's story began in the quiet dawn of empire, when the British Isles were wrapped in mist and expectation. She was young when the crown was placed upon her head, her heart still soft with youth, her eyes wide with both wonder and responsibility. Around her stretched a kingdom vast and growing, its cities pulsing with the new rhythm of the industrial age. But within her own world, the tempo remained slower. The echo of footsteps through long halls, the quiet turning of pages, the sound of rain against palace windows. She grew into her role not through ambition, but through constancy. The days became patterns, audiences, letters, quiet hours by the fire. The weight of the crown pressed gently, yet she carried it with the calm patience of one who understood that power, at its heart, was endurance. Her reign was long, her influence wide, yet what defined her most was not grandeur, but steadiness. The soft persistence of someone who chose to continue, even when the heart grew tired. Her love for Prince Albert brought warmth into the ordered structure of her days. Their time together was marked not by extravagance but by rhythm, shared walks through gardens, music in quiet rooms, letters exchanged when duty kept them apart. When loss came, it arrived like a deep winter. The light dimmed, and her world seemed to shrink to silence. Yet even in grief, she remained constant. Her mourning became its own language of devotion, spoken not in tears, but in the long stillness of remembrance. The empire moved forward around her, railways spreading like veins across the land, voices of progress rising in the air, but Victoria remained the steady center, her life a slow river moving through decades of change. When she appeared before her people, she did so with the composure of stone and the gentleness of time. And when her long reign finally drew to its close, it ended not with thunder, but with quiet dignity, like the final note of a song that had been playing for a lifetime. Far away, in the colder light of the Russian court, another queen would live her own twilight story, Empress Alexandra, the last empress of Russia. Her world was one of beauty and distance, filled with vast rooms and endless winters. She was born into calm and carried that calm with her into the storm that history would later remember. Her love for her husband Nicholas and for their children was the still center of her life. The palace around her glowed with gold and light, but her heart belonged to quieter spaces, to the nursery, to the garden, to the rare moments of peace before the snow began to fall. Alexandra's days moved slowly, each one a careful balance between duty and care. The sound of footsteps in the corridors, the hush of whispers in the throne rooms, the steady rhythm of the clock marking the passing of hours, these were the sounds that filled her life. Outside, her country stretched vast and restless, yet within the walls of her world there was only stillness. She walked often through the great halls of the Winter Palace, her steps soft, her gaze steady, the faint scent of polished wood and frost surrounding her. There was gentleness in her, though the world rarely saw it. To those closest to her, she was tender, devoted, unguarded in the small, private moments that history never records. She loved the music of evening prayers, the soft flicker of lamplight on her children's faces, the feeling of her husband's hand resting quietly in hers. Yet beyond the palace, the tide of time was changing, and change moves faster than stillness can hold. The world was turning toward noise and upheaval, and Alexandra's calm became, in the eyes of others, a kind of distance. But within her own heart, she remained steady, believing that peace would return, that silence could still be a refuge. When the storm came, it arrived not suddenly, but like the slow darkening of the sky before rain. The empire trembled, and the palaces that once shimmered with light grew cold. Through it all, Alexandra stayed close to her family, her stillness unbroken. She faced uncertainty as she had faced everything else, with composure, with quiet courage, with the soft grace of someone who refuses to surrender her calm. And when her story, too, reached its quiet end, it was not noise that marked her passing, but the same deep silence that had surrounded her life. Victoria and Alexandra, two women from two empires, two twilight reigns. Both stood at the meeting point between centuries, between the old rhythm of stillness and the new pulse of modernity. They ruled in different worlds, yet their hearts beat to the same quiet measure. Both understood that the true power of a queen lies not in control, but in presence, the ability to remain unmoved while the world shifts around her. Now, as their memories drift together through time, the light of their reigns fades into a single, soft hue, the grey of dawn, the gold of dusk, the colour of moments when day and night are one. The sound of their age, the ticking of clocks, the rolling of carriages, the faint murmur of polite voices, has all become a distant hum, blending into the gentle pulse of history. What remains is their calm, the peace they carried, even when the world trembled. The night grows deeper now, and their stories settle into the quiet rhythm of the heart. 2 empires gone, 2 lives remembered not for noise, but for stillness. The wind outside the palace walls moves softly, as if carrying their memory through time, whispering it into the long silence that waits between centuries. In that silence, Victoria and Alexandra remain, 2 figures at the edge of history's light, still standing, still serene, still surrounded by the calm of endless twilight. Echoes of the modern age. The light of history grows closer now, and the sound of the world has changed. The carriages have faded into the hum of engines, the gaslight into the shimmer of electricity. The air of empire has given way to the soft pulse of modern time, where voices move through wires and images flicker across glass. Yet even in this new world, the stillness of queens remains, a quiet endurance carried forward through centuries of change. From the long shadow of Victoria rises another reign, distant yet familiar, calm yet vast, Elizabeth II of Britain. And beside her, though never truly beside her, moves the quieter, softer echo of a later age, Diana, Princess of Wales. 2 lives bound by silence and duty, by grace and distance, by the unbroken rhythm of endurance beneath the turning world. Elizabeth came to the crown in the cool light of the mid-20th century, a world remade, yet uncertain. She was young, her eyes bright with composure, her voice measured with care. Around her, the sound of change was everywhere, the hum of engines, the chatter of cameras, the new pulse of modern nations finding their shape. Yet within her own world, the rhythm was unchanged. Her mornings began with ritual, her days with precision. The papers on her desk were always aligned, her gestures calm, her words few but chosen with care. She learned early that a crown is not worn for oneself, but carried for others. Her reign was not a declaration, but a constant, an unbroken stillness through the movements of decades. She met presidents, watched empires dissolve, stood beneath skies that changed from storm to sunlight and back again. And through it all, she remained the same, a fixed point in the slow orbit of time, her presence neither loud nor distant, but steady, like the ticking of a clock that never stops. There were moments of weariness, moments when the quiet must have felt heavy, but she carried them as she carried everything, with composure. Her voice, calm and deliberate, became the sound of reassurance, of continuity. She did not need to command to be heard. Her silence spoke for her, and the world learned to listen to the quiet. In the late evenings, when the halls of her home fell still, she would often walk alone through the gardens, her dogs close by, the sound of their paws soft against the grass. The night air was cool, the scent of earth and roses faint. She would look up at the wide British sky, grey, endless, constant, and let the quiet surround her. For all her years of rule, for all her meetings and speeches and ceremonies, these were the moments that belonged only to her. The stillness between duty and rest, where the world could no longer ask for anything more. And then, in the soft light of another generation, came Diana. The world met her not as a queen, but as a heartbeat, human, open, luminous, She entered the same world of ceremony and control, but carried within her a gentleness that could not be contained. The cameras followed her everywhere, their lights flickering like restless stars, yet within her gaze there was calm, a softness that belonged to another rhythm entirely. Diana understood that compassion could be quiet, that presence could speak louder than power. She moved among people with the lightness of someone who listened, who saw, who cared without distance. In hospitals, in crowds, in silence, she carried warmth that seemed effortless. Yet even warmth can become heavy when the world refuses to rest. Her life, surrounded by beauty and scrutiny, became a kind of reflection, a dance between light and shadow, between what was shown and what was kept. There were moments of solitude behind the noise, moments where the great walls of Kensington Palace seemed to hold too much silence. She would walk the gardens in the early morning, when the air was pale and still, her thoughts moving like clouds. The sound of her footsteps, soft against gravel, was a reminder that even those who seem brightest move through quiet spaces unseen. In her final years, Diana became something more than a figure. She became a feeling, a memory already forming. Her laughter, her calm touch, her eyes that seemed to understand without words, they all became part of the collective silence left behind. The world grieved loudly for her, but beneath the noise was stillness, the same stillness that had followed her all her life. Elizabeth and Diana, two lives woven from the same fabric of duty and grace, yet each moving to a different rhythm. One found peace in constancy, the other sought freedom in motion. Yet both carried within them a kind of quiet that history rarely notices, the quiet of responsibility, of kindness, of human truth. In the end, it is not their crowns or their titles that remain, but the calm that surrounded them, the sense that even in a changing world, some part of time still holds its breath. As the century turned and the years unfolded, the echoes of their lives lingered in the soft corners of memory. The sound of Elizabeth's steady voice, the image of Diana's gentle smile, the quiet strength they both shared in different ways. The world moved on, faster, louder, yet the air seemed to remember them. The calm of service, the warmth of compassion, the stillness that both endured and inspired. Now, as the night deepens once again, their stories drift into the same space where all the queens before them rest. The sound of engines fades, the lights of cities dim, and only the slow rhythm of time remains. Somewhere in that rhythm, their voices still echo, one measured, one tender, blending into the great silence that holds the memory of every woman who stood in grace before the world. The air cools, the stars steady, and the world exhales. The age of noise has passed for now, leaving only calm. In that calm, Elizabeth and Diana remain, quiet and eternal, like reflections on still water, two echoes of the modern age, fading gently into peace. The eternal quiet. The journey has almost reached its end, and time itself seems to exhale. The sound of centuries fades, and the long line of memory begins to soften into one steady tone, low and unbroken. The voices that once filled great halls are quiet now, the footfalls of power gone, the laughter of courts dissolved into air. The queens of history, whose lives we have followed through light and shadow, drift now towards silence. Their stories, once bright with detail and movement, have become part of something larger, the still rhythm of eternity that lies beneath all things. The air around you feels weightless, like the edge between waking and dream. The world you move through is neither the past nor the present, but something beyond both, a place where memory and time fold gently together. The ground beneath your feet is soft, the color of dusk. Above, the sky stretches wide, painted in tones of blue and gold that never quite fade. The wind carries no sound, only warmth. You stand at the edge of time, and before you lies the quiet that has gathered through centuries, the calm that once surrounded queens, poets, empires, and every soul who ever paused to breathe. Their names are still there, but they no longer speak of crowns or power. They are simply notes in the same long harmony. Joanna of Naples, Eleanor of Aquitaine, Isabella and Margaret, Catherine and Christina, Tamar and Wu Zetian, Marie Antoinette and Elizabeth, Victoria and Alexandra, Elizabeth and Diana, all of them now resting within the same still air. Each life, once full of movement and voice, now hums softly beneath the silence, not lost, but transformed. The sound of their worlds has blended into one single pulse, the quiet heartbeat of history. Joanna's patience, Eleanor's wisdom, Isabella's endurance, Margaret's acceptance, Catherine's balance, Christina's wit, Maria's calm, Tamar's grace, Wu Zetian's insight, Marie's tenderness, Elizabeth's solitude, Victoria's constancy, Alexandra's gentleness, Elizabeth's strength, Diana's compassion, all the small, unhurried virtues that once shaped empires now rest together. There is no distance between them anymore, no separation of age or kingdom. Their stillness connects them like a current beneath the sea, unseen but eternal. The air is cool and steady, filled with faint light. It feels as if the world has paused, waiting not for an ending, but for peace. You can almost see them, not as figures of history, not as queens, but as shapes of calm light, their presence quiet, their gaze serene. They stand together in a place beyond sound, beyond memory, where the sky has no beginning and no end. The ground beneath them glows faintly, as if lit from within, and the world around them hums with the breath of time itself. If you listen closely, you can still hear what remains of their stories, not words, but impressions, the way a song lingers after it ends. The soft rhythm of a garden at dusk, the sound of wind across marble, the whisper of a gown brushing the floor, the faint crackle of firelight in an empty hall. Every age leaves behind its own kind of quiet. The castles may crumble, the portraits fade, the books close, but the calm that once filled those spaces remains. It moves gently through the centuries, waiting for those who listen closely enough to find it. History often remembers the loud moments, the wars, the decrees, the coronations, but between those moments lies the stillness that carries the world forward. It is that stillness that lasts, the calm that kept them upright through chaos, the poise that steadied their hearts through loss, the quiet certainty that reminded them that every storm eventually gives way to peace. These were the true crowns they wore, invisible but unbreakable. The empires are gone now, the palaces stand empty, their windows open to the wind, the gardens have grown wild, the fountains filled with fallen leaves, yet even in ruin there is serenity. Time, with its patient hands, smooths every surface, softens every edge, and returns all things to quiet. The marble no longer remembers names, the air no longer holds command, but the silence endures, and in that silence, their essence remains. Imagine walking now through one of those palaces, long after the world has moved on. The moonlight spills through broken windows, the air cool, the corridors endless. You move slowly, your footsteps echoing faintly. There is no one here, and yet it feels full of memory, of presence. The walls still hold the warmth of laughter long gone, the faint vibration of voices that once filled the space. Somewhere, a curtain moves in the breeze, the sound as soft as breath. Everything here is still, and yet alive with the pulse of what was. In that stillness you begin to understand The power of all these women was not in command or in crown, but in presence, the ability to remain, to endure, to exist quietly through the rise and fall of everything around them. Their strength was the calm that did not need to be seen, the grace that did not need to be spoken. It is the same quiet that now fills this moment, this air, this space around you. The wind moves again, light as silk. It carries the scent of earth, of rain, of time. The stars above flicker with slow rhythm, each one a memory from another world. The moon drifts higher, and the night becomes deeper, yet never dark. The light that fills this place does not fade, it only softens, as if the world itself is falling asleep. And in that sleep, the voices of all who came before begin to merge into one, steady, peaceful, infinite. You can feel it now, the weight of history dissolving, the noise of thought fading away. Each breath you take becomes slower, more even, until you are breathing in rhythm with time itself. The queens rest, and so do you. Their calm has become yours, their patience woven into your heartbeat, their stillness flowing through your mind like water. You are no longer watching them from afar, you are part of the same endless quiet they found at last. The air grows even softer. The stars seem closer, their light like distant voices humming a single note. The earth beneath you feels warm and familiar, like the surface of memory. Everything you once thought of as far away is here now, resting within the same calm. There is no beginning, no end, only this moment, this deep silence that stretches forever. The queens of time stand together in this stillness, their faces gentle, their eyes closed. Around them, the world is vast and unmoving. They have laid down their crowns, their histories, their burdens. There is no judgment here, no story left to tell. Only breath, only light, only the quiet peace of existence itself. The same peace waits for everything that has ever been, for everyone who has ever lived and loved and hoped. It is the final resting place of all sound, all motion, all thought. Now the sound of the world fades completely. The wind stills. The stars shine without flicker. The air becomes a single note of warmth and calm. This is the eternal quiet, the place beyond endings where everything that once was continues gently, endlessly, without need or name. Here, every queen, every heart, every moment rests together, not in sleep, but in peace. You stand within that quiet, and for a moment, you feel the weight of all time ease from your shoulders. The light touches your face, the air fills your lungs, and you understand without words that this has always been the destination. Not the crowns, not the stories, but the silence that holds them all, the calm that waits at the end of every journey. The breath slows again. The body softens. The mind begins to drift. Around you, everything dissolves into gentle color and soundless air. The eternal quiet welcomes you not as a stranger, but as something it has known forever. The queens of history, the voices of centuries, the pulse of the earth itself, all rest within the same unbroken peace. And as the last thought fades, there is only stillness. The silence, deep and infinite, stretching beyond time, beyond dream, beyond memory. It is the softest place in the world, the space between heartbeats, the sound between breaths. The story ends here, not in words, but in calm. The eternal quiet is not absence, it is everything, whole, complete, serene. You may rest now, the journey is done, the world sleeps, all is still.